The old cemetery sat on the edge of town, forgotten by most folks except for the occasional history buff or teenage thrill-seeker. Tall grass and weeds pushed through cracked pathways, and moss crawled up the sides of weathered tombstones. This was exactly the kind of place Dr. Lily Chen was looking for. Lily pulled her beaten-up blue car into the gravel lot and checked her watch. 4 in the afternoon. She had a few hours of daylight left to explore before darkness fell. Perfect timing. She grabbed her worn leather bag stuffed with notebooks, her camera and a few granola bars, then headed toward the rusty iron gates. Another day, another graveyard, she muttered to herself, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. 6 months into researching her book on forgotten burial grounds in New England, and she'd seen so many cemeteries they were starting to blur together in her mind. The gate creaked loudly as she pushed it open, the sound echoing through the quiet afternoon. A squirrel darted across her path and disappeared behind a crumbling angel statue. Lily smiled and took a deep breath of the autumn air, rich with the smell of earth and decaying leaves. She pulled out her notebook, flipping through pages of scribbled notes. Pine Hollow Cemetery, established 1763, she read aloud, her voice sounding strangely small in the vastness of the graveyard. Said to contain graves of the town's founders and several unmarked graves from the smallpox outbreak of 1775. She snapped a few photos of the entrance and began to walk the perimeter, making notes about the layout. The cemetery was larger than she expected, with sections clearly divided by era. The oldest grave sat at the back, nestled against a line of ancient oak trees. Lily made her way there, stepping carefully around broken stones and avoiding the spots where the ground felt too soft under her feet. The oldest section was in the worst shape, many of the stones so worn that the names had been erased by centuries of wind and rain. Lily crouched down, brushing fallen leaves from the face of one stone to reveal the faint outline of a name. Worth it for the book, she reminded herself, even as her knees protested. As the sun began to sink lower, casting long shadows across the grounds, Lily decided to wrap up for the day. She'd come back tomorrow to photograph the more interesting graves she'd found. She stood stretching her back when something caught her eye. In the farthest corner of the cemetery, almost hidden by overgrown bushes, was a grave she hadn't noticed before. Unlike the others, this one seemed to be made of a darker stone, and something about it pulled at her attention like a magnet. Just one more, she told herself, picking her way through the tall grass. The gravestone was indeed different, made of a black stone she couldn't immediately identify. The carving was simple, just a name, Thomas Webb, and dates 1692-1741. No loving message, no religious symbols, nothing else to tell who this person had been. But the stone itself was odd. It seemed almost too perfect, too unmarked by time compared to the others around it. Lily ran her hand over the smooth surface, surprised to find it felt warm despite the cool afternoon air. Weird, she whispered, pulling out her camera to take a few shots. As she framed the grave in her viewfinder, she could have sworn she saw a faint blue-green tint around the edges of the stone. She blinked and it was gone. Time for a coffee break, she told herself with a laugh, eyes playing tricks on me. She packed up her things and headed back to her car, making a mental note to look up Thomas Webb when she got back to her rented room in town. As she drove away, she didn't notice how the last rays of the setting sun seemed to linger on that black gravestone, just a little longer than the others. The next morning, Lily headed to the local library. It was a small building with creaky floors and the comforting smell of old books. The librarian, a gray-haired woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked up as Lily entered. "Morning," Lily said with a smile. "I'm doing research on Pine Hollow Cemetery for a book. I was wondering if you have any local history records I could look at." The librarian, her name tag read Miss Bell, brightened immediately. "A book? How wonderful. We don't get many authors in town." "What kind of book?" "It's about historic burial grounds in New England. Pine Hollow has some really interesting graves, especially in the older section." Something flickered across Ms. Bell's face. Concern, maybe? But it passed so quickly, Lily thought she must have imagined it. "We do have some records," Ms. Bell said, leading Lily to a back room. "Town histories, church records, that sort of thing. You're welcome to look through them. Anything in particular you're searching for?" "Actually, yes. I found a grave for someone named Thomas Webb, died 1741. The gravestone was unusual, black stone, very well preserved. I was curious about who he was. Ms. Bell stopped walking so suddenly that Lily almost bumped into her. "You found Thomas Webb's grave?" There was no mistaking it this time. The woman was definitely troubled. "Yes, in the far corner of the cemetery." "Is there something special about it?" Ms. Bell seemed to choose her words carefully. "Not many folks go to that part of the cemetery anymore. It's not well kept. Do you know anything about him?" "Thomas Webb?" The librarian busied herself pulling out old books and folders. "Not much. He wasn't from here originally. Came from Salem, I believe." "Salem? During the witch trials era?" "After, but not by much. Here." She placed a heavy book on the table. "This has some of the town records from that time. I need to get back to the front desk, but let me know if you need anything else." Lily spent the morning poring over dusty records, but found frustratingly little about Thomas Webb. He had indeed come from Salem around 1720, bought a house on the edge of town, and apparently kept to himself. No wife, no children mentioned. His occupation was listed as scholar, which was unusual for the time. By noon, Lily's stomach was growling, and her eyes were tired from squinting at faded handwriting. She decided to take a break and grab lunch at the diner across the street. As she gathered her things, she overheard two older men talking quietly at a nearby table. "Telling you, Jack, someone's been poking around the Webb grave. Mrs. Patterson's boy said he saw lights out there the other night. Probably just kids messing around. You know how they dare each other to go in there at night." "Maybe. But after what happened to that college boy back in '89, they noticed Lily and immediately fell silent. She smiled and nodded as she passed their table. Pretending she hadn't heard anything, at the diner, Lily found herself seated next to an elderly woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Whitaker. When Lily mentioned she was researching the cemetery, the woman's wrinkled face grew serious. "You be careful in that place after dark, young lady," she said, stirring her tea slowly. "Some of those graves have been there a very long time. Some things are best left alone." "I'm just taking photos and notes for my book," Lily assured her. "I'm particularly interested in a grave I found yesterday, Thomas Webb. The stone is so well preserved compared to others from that time." Mrs. Whitaker's hand trembled, spilling a few drops of tea. "You found Webb's grave? Most folks can't even see it unless..." "Unless what?" The old woman shook her head. "Unless it wants to be found." She leaned closer. "That light wasn't meant for mortal eyes. Some things buried should stay buried." A chill ran down Lily's spine despite the warm diner. "What light?" "What do you mean?" But Mrs. Whitaker wouldn't say more, just patted Lily's hand with her own papery one. "Be smart. Don't go back there after sunset. Promise me." Lily made a non-committal noise and quickly finished her lunch. The conversation had left her unsettled but also intensely curious. Scholars didn't get anywhere by ignoring mysteries. That evening, despite the warnings, Lily found herself driving back to Pine Hollow Cemetery. She told herself it was just to take a few more photos while the light was good, but deep down, she knew she was drawn to that strange black gravestone and the secrets it might hold. The sun was just beginning to set as she made her way back to the corner where Thomas Webb's grave stood. In the fading light, she could have sworn the stone looked different somehow, darker, more defined against its surroundings. And then, as the last ray of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, she saw it. A soft blue-green glow began to emanate from the gravestone, faint at first, then growing stronger. Tiny symbols she hadn't noticed before became visible along the edges of the stone, illuminated by the unearthly light. Lily gasped, stumbling back a step. Her heart raced, but the scholar in her pushed forward. She pulled out her notebook with shaking hands and began to sketch the strange symbols. The light from the grave was bright enough now that she could see perfectly, despite the gathering darkness. Almost without thinking, she reached out and traced one of the glowing symbols with her finger. The moment she touched it, the light pulsed brighter, and Lily felt a strange warmth spread up her arm. The symbols seemed to shift under her touch, rearranging themselves into patterns that almost made sense, like a language she'd once known but forgotten. "Incredible," she whispered, her academic curiosity overwhelming her fear. For a historian who had spent countless hours squinting at faded documents in dim archives, this mysterious light that allowed her to see clearly in darkness seemed more helpful than frightening. As she continued to take notes, she failed to notice how the shadows around her deepened, or how they seemed to bend toward her rather than away from the light. She didn't see how her own shadow flickered occasionally, moving when she was still. She was too captivated by the gift of perfect illumination in the darkness, already thinking of how much more research she could accomplish with such a light. By the time she reluctantly packed up her things hours later, the curse had already begun its work, whispering promises of knowledge and discovery into her eager mind. Lily drove home with a strange new energy humming through her veins, dreams of academic glory dancing in her head. She'd come back tomorrow night and the night after that. After all, what harm could come from using a little light to help with her research? Behind her in the now dark cemetery, Thomas Webb's grave continued to glow softly, pulsing like a heartbeat as it waited patiently for her return. Lily woke the next morning feeling more refreshed than she had in months. The early sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of her rented room as she stretched, surprised to find no stiffness in her back, despite spending hours hunched over at the cemetery the night before. She made coffee and opened her laptop, eager to type up her notes from yesterday. As the document loaded, she stared at her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Something looked different about her eyes. They seemed brighter somehow, more alert. She leaned closer, but the effect disappeared. "Just the lighting," she murmured, turning back to her work. The words flowed easily as she described Thomas Webb's grave and the unusual symbols she'd seen. She hesitated when it came to mentioning the blue-green glow. Academic journals didn't typically publish articles about glowing gravestones. She'd sound like one of those ghost hunting shows her nephew loved to watch. "I'll keep that part in my personal notes," she decided, creating a separate file labeled Webb Grave, Unusual Phenomena. Around noon, Lily headed back to the library, hoping to find more information about Thomas Webb. Ms. Bell seemed less surprised to see her this time, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Find what you were looking for yesterday?" the librarian asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Not really. I was wondering if you have any personal papers or journals from that time period. Something that might mention Webb?" Ms. Bell pursed her lips. "There's a collection of letters in the Historical Society building. Might be worth checking." She hesitated, then added, "Did you visit the grave again?" Lily considered lying, but nodded instead. "Yes, late yesterday. It's an interesting sight. Did you notice anything unusual?" The question hung in the air between them. Lily felt a strange reluctance to share what she'd seen. "Just that the stone is remarkably well preserved," she said finally. Ms. Bell seemed to deflate slightly, as if relieved. "Well, good luck with your research, Dr. Chen." The Historical Society was housed in an old Victorian home at the end of Main Street. The volunteer at the desk, a middle-aged man named Ted, brightened when Lily explained her interest. "Webb? Now there's a name I haven't heard in a while. Follow me." He led her to a small room lined with filing cabinets. Family donated these papers about 30 years ago, found them in an attic renovation. No one's shown much interest since that graduate student in the 80s. Graduate student? Ted's face clouded. Young fellow from Boston University. Was writing a thesis on early American occult practices or some such. Spent weeks going through these papers then. He trailed off. Then what? Had some kind of breakdown. They found him wandering the cemetery at night, babbling about lights and voices. Family came and took him away. Never did finish that thesis. Ted shrugged. Anyway, these boxes have letters between the town doctor and his colleagues in Boston. Webb is mentioned a few times. Lily spent the afternoon carefully examining the fragile papers. Most were mundane correspondence about medical supplies and difficult cases, but occasionally Thomas Webb's name appeared. The doctor seemed both fascinated and disturbed by him. Webb continues his unusual experiments. Read one letter dated 1739. He claims to have discovered a method of capturing light within stone, though he will not demonstrate it. His knowledge of ancient languages exceeds anyone I have encountered, yet he cannot explain how he came by such learning. Another letter, dated just weeks before Webb's death, was more alarming. "I fear our Mr. Webb has gone too far in his pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Last night I observed a strange illumination from his cottage window, an unnatural color that no candle or lantern could produce. When questioned this morning, he spoke of ancient magic and the ability to see in darkness. His eyes have taken on a peculiar sheen that I mislike greatly." Lily felt a chill run down her spine as she copied these passages into her notebook. The doctor's description matched exactly what she had seen at the grave. She checked her watch, almost 6. The sun would be setting soon. Despite the warnings echoing in her mind, Lily found herself drawn back to Pine Hollow Cemetery as darkness fell. This time she brought additional supplies, a better camera, more notebooks, and a small digital recorder. The blue-green glow appeared exactly as it had the night before, illuminating the strange symbols on the headstone. Under this light, Lily could work with perfect clarity despite the darkness surrounding her. She began methodically photographing and sketching each symbol, recording her observations as she worked. Symbol resembles ancient Norse rune for vision, but with additional markings, she spoke into the recorder. Next symbol appears to be a variation on Phoenician character for binding or containment. Hours passed as she worked, the light steadily brightening around her. Lily felt a strange energy flowing through her body, as if the light itself was feeding her. She hadn't eaten since lunch, yet felt no hunger. Her mind seemed sharper, connections forming between historical references that she'd never noticed before. "It's incredible," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the increasingly chilly air. "With this light, I could revolutionize our understanding of early American occult practices." As she leaned closer to examine a particularly intricate symbol, Lily caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of her eye. She turned quickly but saw nothing except shadows among the gravestones. "Hello?" she called. "Is someone there?" No answer came, but as she turned back to her work, she could have sworn the shadows moved again, this time slightly closer to where she sat. A whisper seemed to float on the night air, too faint to make out words. Lily shook her head, trying to focus. "Just my imagination," she told herself firmly. But as she bent over her notebook again, the whispering grew louder, like multiple voices speaking just below the threshold of understanding. Lily looked up sharply and gasped. Her own shadow, cast by the grave's light, was moving independently of her, stretching and shifting against the ground as if trying to break free. She jumped to her feet, heart pounding. The moment she moved, her shadow snapped back to normal, following her movements as it should. Lily pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her rapid heartbeat. "I'm exhausted," she muttered. "Been working too hard." She packed up her things quickly, suddenly eager to be away from the cemetery. As she walked back to her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her, just a step behind. That night, Lily dreamed of being buried alive, dirt filling her mouth as she tried to scream. She woke gasping, sheets tangled around her legs. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. As she reached for the glass of water on her nightstand, she caught her reflection in the window. For just a moment, her eyes glowed with the same blue-green light as the grave. The next morning, Lily called her friend and fellow historian, Dr. Ray Patel from the university. "Ray, have you ever heard of Thomas Webb? Early 18th century, lived in New England, possibly involved in occult practices?" "Can't say I have," Ray replied. "Why? Found something interesting for your book?" "Maybe." Lily hesitated, unwilling to share everything. "Just wondered if his name had come up in your research on colonial scholars." "Doesn't ring a bell, but I can check my notes." "Hey, are you feeling okay? You sound tired." "I'm fine. Just working late." "Well, don't overdo it. By the way, the department chair was asking about your sabbatical progress. Mentioned something about the university press being interested in your book." Lily sat up straighter. "Really? That's great news." "Yep. Said to tell you they're especially interested if you've found anything unique. You know how it is. Publish or perish, and they want something that'll stand out." After hanging up, Lily stared at her notes spread across the small desk. The university press interested in her book. It was what she'd been working toward for years. Recognition for her research, a chance to secure tenure. And now she had something unique, something no other historian had documented. She pulled out the photos she'd taken of the glowing symbols. Even in daylight, they seemed to shimmer slightly on the paper. Her hand trembled as she traced one with her finger, remembering the strange energy she'd felt at the grave. "This could make my career," she whispered. That afternoon, Lily returned to the Historical Society to continue her research. Ted wasn't there. Instead, a young woman named Diane helped her access the archives. "You're looking into Thomas Webb?" Diane asked as she unlocked the storage room. "Funny, we just had someone else asking about him last week." Lily's head snapped up. "Who?" "Older gentleman, didn't catch his name. Said he was doing genealogy research but seemed more interested in Webb's burial site than his family connections." A prickle of unease ran down Lily's spine. "Did he say why?" Diane shrugged. Not really. But he left this behind. She handed Lily a small notebook. Thought he might come back for it, but he hasn't. The notebook contained meticulous notes about Webb, including references to his light-gathering experiments and a crude drawing of symbols that matched those on the gravestone. The final page contained a single sentence. The light takes as much as it gives. That evening, despite growing misgivings, Lily found herself drawn once again to the cemetery. The pull was stronger now, almost a physical sensation tugging her toward Webb's grave. This time she noticed that the trip seemed shorter somehow, as if the roads had rearranged themselves to bring her there more quickly. The blue-green glow appeared the moment she approached, brighter than before. As she settled into work, the light wrapped around her like a cocoon, warming her against the autumn chill. The symbol seemed to shift under her gaze, revealing new patterns and connections. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. Lily wrote feverishly, filling page after page with insights and theories. Her book was taking shape in ways she had never imagined, filled with revelations about early American occult practices that would revolutionize her field. It was only when she finally looked up, neck stiff from bending over her notebook, that she realized something was wrong. The cemetery had changed. The other gravestone seemed farther away, as if the ground around Webb's grave had expanded, isolating it from the rest. And the shadows were definitely moving now, circling her position like predators stalking prey. They seemed darker than normal shadows should be, more substantial somehow. As Lily watched, frozen, one shadow broke from the others and approached her. It stopped just at the edge of the grave's light, a humanoid shape with no features visible in its darkness. "Who's there?" Lily called, her voice shaking. "This is private property. You're trespassing." The shadow made no sound, but Lily could feel it watching her. Then slowly it raised what might have been an arm and pointed at her. No, not at her, she realized with growing horror. It was pointing at her shadow. Lily looked down and had to stifle a scream. Her shadow was changing, stretching, and warping. As she watched, it seemed to split into two overlapping shapes, one following her movements, the other remaining still, as if waiting. "What's happening?" she whispered, scrambling to her feet. The moment she stood, the strange shadow figures retreated, melting back into the darkness beyond the grave's light. But Lily could still feel them watching, waiting for something. With shaking hands, she gathered her research materials. As she reached for her recorder, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There was dirt under her fingernails, dirt that hadn't been there before, as if she'd been digging with her bare hands. Lily fled to her car, heart pounding. As she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror. For just a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing by Webb's grave watching her leave. A figure that looked just like her. Lily barely slept that night. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadowy figures from the cemetery, felt their empty gazes on her skin. When she finally did drift off near dawn, her dreams were filled with whispers and blue-green light. She woke to the sound of her phone ringing. It was Ray from the university. "Lily, you sound terrible. Did I wake you?" She glanced at the clock, 11:30 a.m. She never slept this late. "No, I'm up," she lied, rubbing her eyes. "What's going on?" "Remember you asked about Thomas Webb? I found something interesting. There's a mention of him in an unpublished manuscript by Cotton Mather." Lily sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. Cotton Mather was one of the most famous Puritan ministers in colonial America, known for his involvement in the Salem witch trials. What does it say? It's strange. Mather warns about a man named Webb who he claims learned unnatural arts from the condemned witches before their execution. Says Webb collected their knowledge under the guise of recording confessions but was actually preserving forbidden magic. When was this written? Lily's heart was racing. Around 1692, right after the trials. But here's the weird part. Mather wrote that Webb had found a way to store knowledge in light itself, creating what he called illumination that reveals what should remain hidden. Lily's mouth went dry. Anything else? Just a warning to avoid Webb's burial place if he should die while practicing his arts. Mather worried the man's experiments might not end with his death. Ray paused. "Lily, what's going on? You sound freaked out." "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just interesting for my research." "Thanks, Ray." After hanging up, Lily paced her small room, trying to make sense of everything. The glowing grave, the moving shadows, the strange energy she felt when working by the grave's light. It all connected to Webb's experiments with storing knowledge in light. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and stopped cold. Dark circles ringed her eyes, making her look like she hadn't slept in days. But that wasn't what alarmed her. Her eyes had changed. The irises seemed lighter, with faint blue-green flecks that hadn't been there before. A knock at her door made her jump. She opened it to find Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly woman from the diner, standing in the hallway. "May I come in?" the old woman asked without preamble. Stunned, Lily stepped aside. "How did you know where I was staying?" "Small town." Mrs. Whitaker settled into the room's only chair. "I've been watching you, Dr. Chen. You've been to Webb's grave 3 nights running. You've been following me?" "Not following. Watching out for you." The old woman's eyes were sharp despite her age. "You're not the first to be drawn to that grave. Every few decades someone comes along who can see the light." Lily sank onto the edge of her bed. "What is it?" "The light, I mean." "Nothing good," Mrs. Whitaker sighed. Thomas Webb was a collector of secrets, especially those related to power and forbidden knowledge. When the witch trials ended, he gathered what remained of their books and papers, studied them, added his own discoveries. But the light, he found a way to bind knowledge to light itself, a way to preserve what he'd learned even after death. Mrs. Whitaker's voice dropped lower. "But such magic always has a price. The light doesn't just give knowledge, it takes something in return." "Takes what?" Lily whispered, though part of her already knew. "Life. Energy. Eventually, your very self." The old woman leaned forward. "Have you noticed changes, lost time? Things you don't remember doing?" Lily thought about the dirt under her fingernails, the strange reflections, her shadow moving independently. Slowly she nodded. "It's already begun then." Mrs. Whitaker reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn book, bound in faded leather. "My grandmother gave me this. Her mother before her kept it, and so on back to 1741 when Thomas Webb died." "What is it?" "The Journal of Dr. Andrew Clark, the town physician who attended Webb in his final days." She handed it to Lily. "Read it. Understand what you're dealing with. Then decide if your book is worth your soul." After Mrs. Whitaker left, Lily opened the journal with trembling hands. The handwriting was cramped but legible, the English slightly archaic but understandable. "October 15th, 1741, she read aloud. "I fear Thomas Webb has not long to live. His experiments have taken a toll no medicine can reverse. His skin is pale as parchment, his body wasted, yet his eyes burn with an unnatural light. He speaks of his impending death not with fear but anticipation, as if it were merely a transformation rather than an ending." Lily flipped through the pages, reading the doctor's increasingly disturbed observations. "October 20th. Webb insisted today that I help him prepare his burial. He has created a special headstone of black stone, covered in symbols I dare not reproduce here. When I asked their purpose, he said they would allow his knowledge to continue after death. He claimed to have found a way to bind light itself to his grave, a light that would attract those with a thirst for knowledge similar to his own." October 29th. Webb died at midnight. As he drew his final breath, I observed a strange illumination around his body, a color I have never seen before, neither blue nor green, but somehow both. His last words were, "The first shall be my eyes, the second my voice, the third my hands. The fourth shall be me reborn." I know not what he meant, but I am troubled beyond measure. Lily read on, learning how the doctor had tried to destroy the strange headstone but found it impervious to damage. In the end, he could only bury Webb as requested, in the farthest corner of the cemetery, and hope that whatever magic the man had worked would fade with time. The final entry was the most disturbing. December 15th. I witnessed something terrible last night. A traveler, a scholar from Boston who had heard rumors of Webb's research, visited the grave after dark. From my hiding place, I observed a light emanating from the headstone, illuminating the symbols Webb had carved. The scholar was entranced, remained there for hours writing by that unholy light. When he finally departed, I caught a glimpse of his face. His eyes had changed, reflecting the same light as the grave. I fear Webb's evil has not died with him. Lily closed the journal, her mind racing. Everything she had experienced matched the doctor's descriptions from nearly 300 years ago. The light. the knowledge it offered, the changes in her eyes. She was following the same path as Webb's previous victims. But what happened to them? The journal didn't say. She pulled out her phone and called Ms. Bell at the library. The graduate student from the 80s who researched Webb. What was his name? There was a long pause before Ms. Bell answered. David Fletcher, why? Do you know what happened to him? After his breakdown? Another pause. He recovered somewhat. Moved to Arizona. Lives as a recluse from what I heard. Never finished his degree. Anyone else? Has anyone else researched Webb over the years? There was a woman in the 1950s, a historian from New York. And a man in the early 1900s, I think. The town doesn't like to talk about them. Why not? Ms. Bell's voice dropped to a whisper. Because they disappeared, Dr. Chen. The woman's car was found abandoned by the cemetery. The man's belongings were discovered in his hotel room, but he was never seen again. There were rumors. What kind of rumors? That they're still here. In the cemetery. With Webb. The librarian's voice strengthened. Look, this is just old town gossip. But if you're smart, you'll finish your research somewhere else. Some histories aren't meant to be written. After hanging up, Lily sat in silence, staring at her notes spread across the desk. Her book was nearly finished now, filled with insights and connections no other historian had made. The university press would certainly publish it. It could make her career, but at what cost? A glance at the window showed darkness had fallen while she was reading. Without conscious decision, she found herself gathering her notes and heading to her car. The pull was stronger than ever, a physical sensation like a hook behind her ribs, drawing her toward the cemetery. This time, when she arrived at Webb's grave, the blue-green light appeared before she even got out of her car. It seemed to pulse with anticipation, growing brighter as she approached. The shadowy figures were waiting, standing just beyond the light's reach. Lily counted them, 3 distinct shapes watching silently. With a chill, she recalled Webb's final words. The first shall be my eyes, the second my voice, the third my hands. The fourth shall be me reborn. 3 previous victims. She would be the fourth. As she stood there, paralyzed between fear and fascination, a sudden downpour began. Rain fell in sheets, drenching her within seconds. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cemetery in stark white light that momentarily overpowered the grave's blue-green glow. In that flash, Lily saw the shadowy figures clearly for the first time. They weren't shadows at all, but people. 3 people with pale, translucent skin and eyes that glowed like the grave itself. Their mouths moved in unison, though no sound came out, repeating the same words over and over. She didn't need to hear them to know what they were saying. Run, while you still can. Thunder cracked directly overhead, and Lily dropped to her knees in the mud. The storm had broken the grave's spell, at least momentarily, fighting against the pull that still tugged at her. She crawled back toward her car. The blue-green light flared brighter, almost angry, and Lily felt a pressure in her head like someone trying to force their way in. Images flashed through her mind. Ancient rituals, forgotten languages, secrets that scholars would kill to know, all offered freely if she would just return to the light. No, she gasped, pulling herself forward through the mud. No, I won't. She reached her car and fumbled with the keys, her hand shaking violently. As she finally got the door open, she looked back at the grave. The 3 figures stood there in the rain, their glowing eyes fixed on her. Behind them, a 4th shape was forming, more substantial than the others, with features that looked horribly familiar. It was her own face, but not quite. Her face as it might look after years of existing in that half-life state, neither fully dead nor truly alive. With a cry of terror, Lily threw herself into the car and sped away from Pine Hollow Cemetery, not daring to look back. Lily drove blindly through the storm, windshield wipers struggling against the downpour. Her hands shook on the steering wheel as she kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see glowing eyes following her. She didn't stop until she reached the town limits, pulling into an all-night diner where the bright fluorescent lights and smell of coffee promised safety. The waitress looked concerned as Lily stumbled in. Soaked to the bone and pale as a ghost, "Honey, you look like you've seen the devil himself," the woman said, bringing over a towel and a cup of hot coffee without being asked. Car trouble in this storm. Lily shook her head, unable to explain. How could she tell this stranger that she'd nearly been consumed by a centuries-old curse? That she'd seen her own future self as a half-dead thing trapped between worlds? Just got caught in the rain. she managed, wrapping her cold hands around the warm mug. Thank you. As the caffeine hit her system, Lily tried to think clearly. She couldn't go back to her rented room. It was too close to the cemetery, and she felt certain the pull would only grow stronger. She needed help, but who would believe her? Mrs. Whitaker. The old woman understood what was happening. She'd tried to warn Lily from the beginning. It was nearly midnight by the time Lily found Mrs. Whitaker's house, a small cottage on the outskirts of town. Despite the late hour, lights still burned in the windows. The old woman answered on the first knock as if she'd been expecting a visitor. You've seen them now, Mrs. Whitaker said simply, ushering Lily inside. It wasn't a question. The cottage was warm and smelled of herbs and old books. Every available surface was crowded with strange objects. Dried plants hanging from the ceiling, crystals catching the lamplight, shelves packed with ancient-looking volumes. How did you know? Lily asked, accepting the dry clothes the woman offered. The storm. Thomas Webb's power always weakens during electrical storms. It's when his victims have their best chance of breaking free, if they choose to fight. Mrs. Whitaker gestured toward the bathroom. Change first, then we'll talk. When Lily emerged in borrowed clothes that smelled faintly of mothballs, she found Mrs. Whitaker at a cluttered table, paging through what looked like a family Bible. My family has watched over this town for generations, the old woman explained without looking up. Ever since Webb's death, we've kept records, tried to warn those who might fall victim to his curse. You knew what would happen to me? Mrs. Whitaker finally looked up, her eyes sad. I tried to warn you, but the grave chooses those with a certain hunger for knowledge. Once it sets its sights on someone, they rarely listen to warnings. What exactly is happening to me? Lily sank into a chair across from her. Webb discovered a way to preserve himself through his victims. The first 3 were just preparation. His eyes to see the changing world, his voice to speak across time, his hands to record what he learned. Mrs. Whitaker tapped a page in her book. But the 4th victim is different. The 4th becomes his vessel for rebirth. That's what I saw at the cemetery. Myself, but not myself. Yes. Webb is trying to create a new body for his consciousness using yours as a template. Every time you use his light, he grows stronger while you grow weaker. Eventually, you'll fade completely and he'll take your place. Lily shuddered, remembering the face she'd seen forming in the storm. How do I stop it? It won't be easy. The connection works both ways. You've gained knowledge from him, but he's gained a foothold in your mind. The old woman studied Lily's face. I can see it in your eyes. The color has already started to change. Can it be reversed? Perhaps. My grandmother once helped a man break free back in 1915, but he was only just beginning to feel the effects. Mrs. Whitaker frowned. You've progressed further than I thought. How long have you been visiting the grave? Only 3 nights. The old woman looked alarmed. 3 nights? That's not possible. The changes shouldn't happen so quickly unless... She trailed off, her expression darkening. Unless what? Unless Webb is getting stronger. Unless he's nearly ready. Mrs. Whitaker stood suddenly. We need to work quickly. The storm won't last forever, and once it passes, his power will return in full. For the next hour, Mrs. Whitaker gathered supplies, herbs, crystals, candles, and a small wooden box that she handled with extreme care. As she worked, she explained what they would need to do. Webb's power comes from the symbols on his gravestone. They act as a conduit, focusing the energy he collected during life and continues to gather through his victims. To break his hold on you, we need to disrupt that connection. How? There's a ritual. It needs to be performed at the grave itself, during the darkest part of night when the veil between worlds is thinnest. The old woman looked grim. It's dangerous. If Webb realizes what we're doing, he'll fight back with everything he has. We're going back to the cemetery? Tonight? Lily felt a surge of fear mixed with a troubling sense of anticipation that she recognized wasn't entirely her own. We have to. Every hour that passes, his hold on you grows stronger. Mrs. Whitaker placed a hand on Lily's arm. But you should know there's a price. Magic always demands balance. What kind of price? The knowledge you've gained from Webb, all the insights for your book, the connections no other historian has made, you'll lose them. The ritual will sever all ties between you and Webb, including the knowledge his light revealed to you. Lily felt a stab of dismay. Her book, the work that could make her career, secure her future, would be ruined. All those brilliant insights gone. For a moment she hesitated. and in that moment of hesitation she felt it, a presence in her mind that wasn't her own, watching, listening, whispering that she didn't need to give up what she'd learned, that she could control the situation, use Webb's power without succumbing to it, that her name could live forever in the annals of history. With a gasp, Lily pushed the thoughts away. "It doesn't matter. I'll do whatever it takes." Mrs. Whitaker nodded, relief evident in her eyes. "Good. Now help me gather the rest of what we need." By 3 a.m. the storm had lessened to a steady rainfall as they parked at the cemetery gates. The night was pitch black, clouds hiding the moon and stars. Mrs. Whitaker handed Lily a flashlight. "Use this only when necessary. Any light might strengthen his power." They made their way carefully through the cemetery, Mrs. Whitaker leading despite her age. As they approached the corner where Webb's grave stood, Lily felt the familiar pull growing stronger. Her steps became heavier as if her body was fighting against her mind's decision. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows what we're doing." "Stay strong," Mrs. Whitaker urged. "Your will is still your own." When they reached the grave, Lily expected to see the blue-green glow, but the stone remained dark. The storm had weakened Webb's power, just as Mrs. Whitaker had said. But even without the visible light, Lily could feel the grave's influence reaching for her, like invisible fingers trying to grab hold of her mind. Mrs. Whitaker worked quickly, setting candles at specific points around the grave and sprinkling herbs in a circle. From the wooden box she removed a small silver knife and a vial of dark liquid. "What is that?" Lily asked. "Water from 7 sacred wells collected over 7 years. The old woman's voice was tense with concentration. "Stand here directly facing the headstone." As Lily took her position, the rain suddenly stopped. The night became unnaturally still, not even a breeze stirring the wet leaves. The silence pressed against her ears like a physical weight. "He's coming," Mrs. Whitaker said urgently. "We need to hurry." The ritual began with Mrs. Whitaker speaking words in a language Lily didn't recognize. The candles flickered to life without being lit, their flames an ordinary yellow that somehow seemed to push back against the darkness. "Now," Mrs. Whitaker said, handing Lily the silver knife, 3 drops of your blood on the stone. Freely given to take back what was freely taken." Lily's hand trembled as she pricked her finger. As the first drop of blood touched the black stone, a wind rose from nowhere, whipping around them. The second drop fell, and Lily heard voices, angry, frightened, pleading, rising in a cacophony that seemed to come from the ground itself. Before she could add the third drop, the blue-green light suddenly flared from the grave with blinding intensity. Lily staggered back, shielding her eyes. When she could see again, her heart froze. The 3 shadowy figures from before stood around the grave, but now they were clearly visible. 2 men and a woman, their forms translucent but distinct. Their eyes glowed with Webb's unnatural light, and they moved with jerky, puppet-like motions. "Stop," they spoke in unison, their voices overlapping in an eerie chorus. "You don't understand what you're giving up." Behind them, a 4th figure was taking shape, more substantial than the others, with features that shifted between Lily's own and those of a stern-faced man she somehow knew was Thomas Webb himself. "Think of your book," the 4th figure said, its voice a disturbing blend of Lily's and a man's deeper tones. "Think of your career, your legacy. All can still be yours." Images flashed through Lily's mind, her book published to worldwide acclaim, her name spoken with reverence by future scholars, invitations to prestigious universities, honors, and awards, all the recognition she'd ever dreamed of, all the validation of her work and her worth. She wavered, the knife still poised over the stone. "Lily," Mrs. Whitaker's voice cut through the visions. "It's an illusion. He's showing you what you want to see." The old woman's words broke the spell. With a cry of defiance, Lily pressed her bleeding finger to the stone, adding the 3rd drop of blood. The reaction was immediate and violent. The blue-green light flared into a pillar that shot upward into the night sky. The 3 ghostly figures screamed, their forms wavering like smoke in a strong wind. The 4th figure, Webb, lunged toward Lily with an inhuman howl of rage. Mrs. Whitaker threw the vial of well water at the headstone, where it shattered. The liquid seemed to burn where it touched the black stone, etching into the symbols. The old woman began chanting again, her voice rising above the chaos. Lily felt something tearing inside her mind. Knowledge. Insights. Connections she'd made while working by the grave's light, all being ripped away. She fell to her knees, clutching her head in agony. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw the ghostly figures being pulled back toward the grave, their forms stretching and distorting as if caught in a powerful current. The fourth figure fought the hardest, its features fully transforming into those of a man with burning eyes and a face twisted with fury. "You are mine," Webb's voice thundered in Lily's mind. "Your life is mine." "No," she gasped, fighting through the pain. "I take back what's mine. You have no power over me." A final surge of blue-green light erupted from the grave, so bright it turned night to day for one blinding moment. Then darkness crashed down, complete and absolute. Lily felt something snap inside her like a cord being cut, and collapsed onto the wet ground. The last thing she heard before consciousness fled was Mrs. Whitaker's voice, tired but triumphant. "It's done. He's gone." Lily woke to the smell of herbs and the soft crackling of a fire. Her head pounded as if she'd been hit with a hammer, and every muscle in her body ached. She was lying on a couch in Mrs. Whitaker's cottage, a heavy quilt tucked around her. "Welcome back," the old woman said, appearing at her side with a steaming cup of tea. "You've been asleep for almost 20 hours. Lily struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. "What happened?" "After I passed out, the ritual worked. Webb's hold on you is broken." Mrs. Whitaker helped her hold the cup. "Drink this. It will help with the headache." The tea tasted bitter but warmed Lily from the inside. As she sipped, fragments of memory returned. The cemetery, the ghostly figures, the blinding light, and the feeling of something being torn from her mind. "My research," she said suddenly, nearly spilling the tea. "My notes are safe," Mrs. Whitaker assured her. "I brought your bag from the cemetery. But Lily, you should know, the knowledge you gained from Webb's light, it's gone." Lily didn't need the old woman to tell her. She could feel the absence like missing teeth, spaces in her mind where brilliant insights had been, the connections she'd made while working by the grave's light, the revelations about early American occult practices, all vanished as if they'd never existed. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Whitaker said gently. "It was the only way to free you." Lily nodded, fighting back tears. Her book, the groundbreaking work that would have secured her academic future, was ruined. All those hours of research, the career-making discoveries gone. "Better to lose a book than your soul," she said finally, trying to smile. "I made the right choice." "You did. Many wouldn't have been so strong." Mrs. Whitaker settled into a chair across from her. "Rest today. Tomorrow will be soon enough to think about what comes next." But Lily couldn't rest. Despite her exhaustion, her mind kept returning to the cemetery, to Webb's grave, to the 3 ghostly figures who had been his previous victims. "What happened to them?" she asked. "The others, his eyes, his voice, his hands. Are they free now too?" Mrs. Whitaker's face grew solemn. "I don't know. No one has ever broken the connection this late in the process. Perhaps they're at peace now that Webb's power is broken, or perhaps they're still bound to the grave but no longer under his control." "I saw their faces," Lily said quietly. "They looked relieved when the ritual worked, like they wanted to be free. Let's hope they are." The old woman squeezed Lily's hand. "Now try to sleep. Real sleep without dreams or whispers." But sleep wouldn't come. As night fell, Lily found herself standing at the cottage window, staring in the direction of the cemetery. The pull was gone, that hook behind her ribs that had drawn her to Webb's grave night after night. But in its place was something else, a nagging worry, a sense of unfinished business. "I need to go back," she said, when Mrs. Whitaker found her still at the window an hour later. "Just once more, to make sure it's really over." "It's too dangerous," the old woman protested. "Webb may be weakened, but that doesn't mean he's gone for good. His grave has stood for nearly 300 years. Such evil doesn't vanish in a single night." "I know, but I need to see for myself." Lily turned to face her. "You said the ritual broke his hold on me. If that's true, then I should be able to visit the grave without being affected, right?" Mrs. Whitaker looked troubled. "In theory, yes. But Lily, why take the risk?" "Because I need to know it's really over, and..." Lily hesitated. "And because of the others. The ones who weren't as lucky as me. I want to make sure they're at peace." The old woman studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. "You won't go alone. I'm coming with you." They drove to the cemetery just after sunrise when the morning light was still pale and new. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and clean. Birds sang in the trees, and drops of dew sparkled on the grass between the gravestones. It was hard to believe that just 2 nights ago, this peaceful place had been the site of such supernatural horror. As they walked toward the corner where Webb's grave stood, Lily felt a flutter of anxiety but no pull, no compulsion drawing her forward. When they reached the spot, Mrs. Whitaker gasped. The black headstone was still there, but it had changed. The glossy surface was now dull and cracked, with deep fissures running through the stone. The symbols that had once glowed with blue-green light were faded, many of them broken by the cracks. "It's dying," Mrs. Whitaker whispered. "Webb's power is fading." Lily approached cautiously, half expecting to feel the familiar pull or see the eerie glow return. But the stone remained lifeless, its power apparently broken by their ritual. "What about the others?" she asked. "The victims?" As if in answer, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves around them. For just a moment, Lily thought she saw 3 faint shapes standing near the grave, the ghostly figures from before, but different now. Their eyes no longer glowed with Webb's unnatural light. They seemed more peaceful, their forms less substantial, as if they were already beginning to fade away. One of them, the woman, seemed to look directly at Lily and nod once before dissolving into the morning light. "They're free," Lily said softly. "They can finally rest," Mrs. Whitaker nodded. "Thanks to you. Your sacrifice broke a chain that had lasted for centuries." They stood in silence for a few minutes, paying respect to those who had not been as fortunate as Lily. Then, by unspoken agreement, they turned to leave. As they walked back through the cemetery, Lily felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she hadn't known she was carrying had been lifted from her shoulders. The loss of her research still hurt, but it seemed a small price to pay for her freedom, and for helping 3 trapped souls find peace. "What will you do now?" Mrs. Whitaker asked as they reached the car. "About your book?" Lily sighed. "Start over, I guess. Back to traditional research methods, libraries, archives, interviews. It'll take longer and it won't have the same spark that Webb's knowledge gave it. But it'll be mine. Honestly earned. I may be able to help with that," the old woman said thoughtfully. "My family has collected local histories for generations. We have records that aren't available in public archives. You'd share them with me? After everything that happened?" "Precisely because of everything that happened," Mrs. Whitaker smiled. "You chose truth over acclaim, integrity over easy success. That's the kind of historian who should be writing this history." 3 months later, Lily sat in her university office, surrounded by stacks of books and folders. Her sabbatical had ended and she'd returned to teaching while continuing to work on her book in her spare time. Progress was slower now. Without Webb's supernatural insights, she had to piece together the history of New England burial grounds through conventional research. Some days she couldn't help remembering how easily the connections had come when working by the grave's light, how brilliant her work had seemed. But those moments of regret were becoming less frequent. In their place was a solid pride in what she was accomplishing, through honest scholarship and hard work. Mrs. Whitaker had been true to her word, sharing family records that provided valuable new perspectives on local burial traditions, and Lily had found that her own natural intuition as a historian was stronger than she'd given herself credit for. The phone on her desk rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Dr. Chen? It's Ray. Just calling to see how the book is coming along." "Slower than I'd like," she admitted, "but steady progress." "Well, I have some news that might cheer you up. Remember I mentioned your research to the university press? They're still interested even with the new direction you described. Said your proposal about the intersection of burial traditions and community belief systems was refreshingly grounded in solid historical methodology." Lily laughed. "That doesn't sound very exciting. In publishing terms, it's high praise. They'd like to see your first 3 chapters by spring." After hanging up, Lily returned to her notes with renewed energy. Her book wouldn't be the sensation it might have been with Webb's knowledge, but it would be respected by her peers, built on sound research rather than supernatural shortcuts. As she worked, she didn't notice the faint shadow that briefly darkened her window, or the momentary flicker of blue-green light reflected in her computer screen. Outside her building, a young man paused to look up at her window. He was a new graduate student, recently arrived from out of state. No one knew much about him yet, except that he was intensely interested in local history and burial grounds. He checked the small notebook in his hand, where he'd jotted down the name of a cemetery he'd heard mentioned in the history department, Pine Hollow. Supposedly it contained graves dating back to the early 18th century. Perfect for my research, he murmured, tucking the notebook away. He'd visit this weekend, perhaps at night when he could work undisturbed. He always did his best thinking after dark. As he walked away, no one noticed how his shadow seemed to stretch behind him, longer than it should have been in the afternoon light. Or how for just a moment it divided into two overlapping shapes, one following his movements, the other remaining oddly still. In a forgotten corner of Pine Hollow Cemetery, a cracked black headstone waited patiently. The damage was extensive but not complete. A single intact symbol remained, barely visible among the fissures. And as the sun began to set, someone walking past might have noticed a very faint blue-green glow beginning to emanate from that last unbroken symbol, weak now but growing stronger with each passing day. After all, Thomas Webb had waited nearly 300 years for his fourth victim. He could wait a little longer for the fifth,